Hello and welcome to Face to Face. Our guest today is Raymond Geisler. Raymond, am I saying that correctly?
Geisler is just fine, thanks.
Raymond Geisler. Raymond is from Nanaimo. He's got a radio show called Unbought and Unbossed on Nanaimo Community Radio, which is CHLY. CHLY. And we're going to be talking about quite a few issues today, so welcome to the show. Raymond, you want to talk a bit about what you call becoming the media. So why don't you lead off with that?
Okay. I suppose that what we're doing right now is becoming the media. Likewise, my radio show is an extension of becoming the media. And the idea behind that is that, well, a lot of persons that are paying close attention to world events, now maybe I should say world events, not from the corporate television daily newspaper view, but, well, primarily through publications of books and the internet. So in that sense, becoming the media is informing our family, our friends, our community members, the persons that we love and want to protect in our communities, to giving them perhaps a more accurate view of what's going on. Because a lot of people are coming to find that the mainstream media, they're not giving us the goods.
You want to give a couple of examples of that?
Well, certainly. From my personal background, 9/11, I think, might be the largest of these issues. The official story is not and cannot be true for a million reasons. It's a lie from start to finish. Those who have looked into it rather quickly find out that there are problems. If they choose to keep looking, they're going to find out there's lots of problems in the official story. So myself, this radio station, CHLY, they're at 101.7 FM. You can also listen live streaming on the internet. So it's www.chly.ca. So the world can listen to that.
Let's just say that one more time,
www.chly.ca.
Listen in, folks. When is your show on?
Wednesdays from 8 to 10 p.m., and that's Pacific Standard Time.
Okay.
So
that's the time we're in, I think.
Yes,
Okay.
It is. Unfortunately, I've had quite a few guests. My last two telephone guests have both been very brave, strong women from Saskatoon. And that's 2 hours difference. But I've also had quite a few guests from Toronto and Montreal. And that's getting into the wee hours of the morning.
Right for them.
That doesn't work out too well. So yes, Pacific Standard Time. Becoming the media. I've been supporting this show, Face to Face with Jack Etkin, on my show because I think it's a good example of becoming the media. Talking about pertinent issues. This show is quite nice because it covers quite a large variety of topics. Likewise, I like to think that my show does as well. It's been called Canada's only 9/11 Truth radio show, but it encompasses much more than just that topic.
What are some of the other issues you have guests on about?
Well, I suppose whistleblowers that have various information. Their research has put them in a place that they themselves are proof that the official media is not accurate. And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to speak on those issues.
So a whistleblower on what issue?
I'll answer that in a around-the-corner way.
Okay.
When I first got my show, a little over 2 years ago, I attempted to get politicians and media personalities on my show, and I guess I was going to kind of confront them on the different issues and how they're being presented by their corporations and by their government. And I quickly learned that they don't want to take part in this type of becoming the media, and that was really unfortunate for me. There's a lot of people who are in a position that, this sounds like a pretty heavy line to draw, but it almost comes down to either they're ignorant of the issues and of contemporary history today, or they're fully aware of the problems and they're choosing not to speak out. And we can call them a couple different names, maybe a traitor, maybe corrupt. It's pretty tough. Now, you asked for examples of whistleblowers. I have one coming up later this month. We're in mid-February right now. So in the end of February, I'm going to have a gentleman who the Canadian government asked him to take part in a Kyoto conference that was sponsored by the government. And he is a naturalist, and he has an in-home company, I suppose. His family runs it, and they create medicinal ointments and treatments. And the Canadian government wanted to use him as a poster boy for how green and progressive Canada is. Well, he very quickly found out that Canada is not the green progressive as they like to say, and that they were only using him as a media boy.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that would be one example.
That's an important issue. I mean, that's the kind of thing that really we never hear about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Canada on the international stage has become a bit of a pariah. We're not the Canada that we think we were from 10 or 15 years ago on a lot of issues. We have been supporting the Bush White House from before when the Bush White House was there on a lot of issues. And these are kept secret. We don't know what our government is doing internationally, but a lot of it is not very nice stuff. On trade issues, on health issues, on environmental issues, we are not the friend of the poor and dispossessed. We are the friend of the corporation. That's what Canada has become. And it's not the Canada that I want on the world stage. And we never hear about that kind of stuff in the media because the media does not want us waking up and saying, hey, what's Canada doing? And interfering with the corporations and the corporate politicians as they carry out their job 365 days a year of basically destroying everything in their path.
Mm-hmm. I was born in the States, and I came to Canada as a 10-year-old boy. And at first, I didn't want to accept Canada because America is the greatest at everything, according to a 10-year-old boy. Mom, baseball, and apple pie, that was all that mattered. And you look out if you say something otherwise about America the wonderful. So as the years progressed, I came to fall in love with the things that Canada was known for, that you spoke of, the peacekeeping. The country that would accept military deserters from the States and welcome them.
Yes.
That their morals are Canadian morals, and that, gives you the warm fuzzy inside. Yeah. That
exactly.
Yeah,
right.
son of a gun, and that's what my show is about. And I think most persons that are part of this new truth movement, and when I say that, I don't want to only include the 9/11 movement, because from my understanding, and I'm fairly well versed in this truth movement, it encompasses many, many issues. Truth regardless of its color and background.
I got involved through environmental issues 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I remember coming to the horrible realization after a few years that it was totally corrupt from the top down. I was working on forestry issues. Okay. And you start off bright-eyed and bushy-tailed thinking, this is so obvious that we're destroying everything. We're getting fewer jobs per tree cut down than virtually any constituency in the world. We're destroying the forests. We can do better. But it doesn't matter. Somebody told me when I started that you can pile the evidence on the table up to the ceiling. Nobody in government cares because their minds are made up. They are working for the logging companies on that particular issue. And basically, they'll patronize you, but you aren't going to win because it's a fixed game. And it's a fixed game in just about everything. We aren't a democracy. We are basically a corporate-run society. And unless and until we can change that, and we'd better change it very quickly, because on both environmental issues and economic issues, things are becoming very, very, very grim, as I'm sure most of our viewers would agree to. Have you had any guests on about the economic situation that we're in?
Well, let me see. There's a Victoria activist, Guy Selzler. He's been on my show speaking on specifically on economic issues. he might be the only one on that topic. Now, that is you can study that in universities for many years and still not know everything. That's a very large pie to
me,
dig into.
One of the big issues on that one is, are we here by accident? In other words, the people who run the show just absolutely lost control, or are we here by design? And they have led us into this catastrophe. They are pocketing money by the hundreds of billions of dollars because somebody is, and they are going to crash everything, which seems to be happening now, leave the rest of us in utter chaos, and basically walk away to their palaces. I mean, that could be the situation. When you look at what's happened over the last 10 years, it's basically the underlying problem seems to be the free trade deals, which have moved so much of our manufacturing jobs overseas to low-wage countries. And as wealth flowed out of North America, and especially out of the United States, they had to keep America going because America is the consumer of all of this junk that's made everywhere. So how do you do it? You create a housing bubble. I mean, they created a few other bubbles along the way, the dot-com bubble, but the housing bubble is the last one. And basically, America was broke, but they created a huge amount of paper money and paper wealth to keep the United States economy buying for another 5 or 6 years.
In debt.
In debt, in massive debt. And when that began to collapse, because people simply couldn't, there simply weren't any more house purchasers, that's when they brought in the subprime mortgage people. They gave mortgages to people who in no way could afford them, but that kept it going for another couple of years. And now, basically, they've led us to the verge of absolute disaster. And I've heard in the States, the solution may be to start privatizing everything. In other words, all the public's assets are going to be sold off at rock bottom prices because the states are very near bankruptcy, in California to begin with, maybe.
And they're going to promise us prosperity through trickle down, aren't they?
Yes.
So, I can't wait. Yeah, the way you introduced that, asking whether this was by accident or on purpose, and that reminds me of a saying that's becoming more and more popular. I'll concede to being a conspiracy theorist if you will likewise admit to being a coincidence theorist. And,
which means?
Well, that everything just kind of happens. You know, there's no one pulling the strings up top.
Oh, things just
This
happen.
is just the way they happen, and darn it, we're doing our best to get them back on track, aren't we?
Yeah.
No. I firmly believe the more that I've been learning over these years, it seems to me that there's a structure of power above the national government. And, you know, to those that, you know, likewise have been learning about this, that doesn't sound like a surprise, but if you take this to your average telephone or television viewer, no. You know, they don't know about these various secret societies that literally the world's elite, these families that, perhaps the international bankers, you know, the money generated over the centuries, you know, it is absolutely hideous. From the best I can understand, in numerous cases, these banking families have funded both sides of major combat, world wars.
Well, let's take a look at World War II. If anybody chooses to Google Bush and Hitler, I don't know if you've ever done that.
Of course, yeah.
If you Google Bush and Hitler, you will find that George Bush's grandfather, Senator Prescott Bush, senator and banker Prescott Bush, was involved, along with basically parts of the American corporate business economic elite, in funding the Nazis and bringing Adolf Hitler to power in the early years when money is so important. Anybody who's been involved in a small group knows that without a little bit of money, nothing much happens. So, you know, like everybody else, Adolf Hitler needed money. And it was Western bankers and Western very wealthy families, and others as well, no doubt, who were funding him. And,
Indeed, there was an attempted coup in 1934. I guess you could say a fascist coup, a corporatist coup. They were hoping to use Smedley Butler, the most decorated Marine at that time in American history, to lead this coup.
Now you should go into that a little bit more, because this is something that I'd never heard of until a few years ago. Yes, it is documented historical fact. It's on the record.
That's part
And
of the history
it
that
was an
doesn't exist
attempt,
anymore.
yeah, and yet it disappears from our history. It's not in the school books. It's not in the media.
And it's so important.
And it's so important. And basically what it was an attempt by the richest U.S. families to overthrow Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and basically institute a military government under the leadership of Smedley Butler, who, as you say, was the most decorated Marine or soldier
Marine, I believe, yeah.
in the United States at that time. And what happened?
Well, he wrote a book, and
But he didn't.
he did not. He was a truth teller himself, and he came clean. I'm not remembering the title of his publication. Oh, it's a fantastic title as well. Regardless, he told the truth.
Testified to
said
Congress,
what was
went
going
to
to happen.
Congress.
Yes, indeed, and Congress did find that this plan existed.
Yes. Nothing was ever done to the
It was swept under
because they are the power.
Yeah,
They are the power.
Yeah, amazing.
If anybody wants to Google Smedley Butler, I'm sure you'll find the story very quickly.
He has some famous quotes.
Yeah.
Talking about, I had been a soldier for American corporations in Central and South America, and he names all these countries that, the Marines had gone in and staged coups.
And he did it as a young man who was a believer that everything he was doing was right and just, and yet, of course, just as it is today, it's all a pack of lies. It's all phony.
There's a lot of similar brave people out there today that are doing very similar things. Yes. I can think of Michael Rupert, the decorated police officer out of LA who stumbled across a narcotics issue in which he actually found out that the CIA was importing drugs.
That's right.
And he's still very active in his truth-telling research.
Yes.
It goes on, and that's fantastic. There are a lot of very inspiring people, and there are heroes out today that you and I know of some of them, and let's hope that more and more learn.
It's unfortunate that the media, which is sort of part of the subject of our discussion tonight, it's too bad that the media itself never really covers these people. And of course that's deliberate too, just as everything else is deliberate. They don't want the public to know that there are these great, courageous, heroic men and women out there doing very good things, because the enemy for most of these people is the corporation. And since the corporation owns the media is not going to cover these people. Instead, we get sports and entertainment and Madonna and whoever they want to give us. But the real heroes, people like, for example, Percy Schmeiser, I'll mention that name.
I don't know that name.
He is very prominent in the movement to stop the genetic contamination of our food supply. Okay. He's a Canadian hero. He's been around the world. He's won awards worldwide. And of course, like most Canadians, you don't know that name. Yeah, never heard of him. Terry Fox. I mean, there is a real hero, and there's somebody, because it was something that was non-political. He was allowed to be the hero that.
That's right. I'm thinking of one other hero. He's been on my show a couple times, and he also fits the description of a whistleblower, which you asked about earlier. His name is Kevin Annett, and he's a former minister who's turned whistleblower in uncovering the genocidal attempts by the Canadian government and the churches that were hired to make the First Nation problem go away or become as small as possible. And that was done through numerous ways. That's someone I would love to see on your show.
You know what? I've heard of him, and I remember that name, and yes, the story he told was quite remarkable.
Indeed. They went after, they attacked him, his person physically, but more importantly, of course, he lost his job. Defrocked, I think maybe is the term he's used in the past. But he's somehow found this inner strength. Maybe he's acting on, I'm not a Christian. I know a little bit about the Bible. Personally, myself, I don't think that there was a Jesus Christ, but that's not really here nor there. But I find Kevin Annett is doing a pretty good job in practicing the teachings of this Jesus character. And that's a brave person, to stand up and say, I've got my morals, and luckily this man has courage as well. And of
course, what was done to the natives was not done in secret. you can be very sure that everybody who was in the know knew about it and had signed on to it. And that means the business structure as well. It wasn't just the government and the media, because they kept it secret while it was happening, and only discovered it, in quotation marks, many years later when it was convenient, because the Catholic Church was getting a little uppity and had to be brought down, and the United Church and all the rest of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Indeed. There's some other, can I carry on, or did you want to change?
Well, you said earlier we should talk about the form of government that we're moving into, which I think you mentioned Naomi Klein called it a corporatist form of government.
Yeah, she's afraid of the word fascism.
Yeah, and other people call it a fascist form of government. Maybe you just want to go there.
Okay. Well, Mussolini, in the early, maybe it was even the late 20s, stated the quote that basically fascism is corporatism. And it's the merger of the state and the money. And they're going to work together for their goals. And when you make all the rules and the other side has all the money and owns all the business and industry, and access to the resources and so on, what's left?
Just the people.
Just the workers. And very quickly, one of the things that happens in a fascist, dictatorship, basically, a militaristic dictatorship, mind you, labor rights are suppressed. Unions are quite often eliminated. Corporations seem to be, don't seem to be, they do become above the law. There's this tremendous attempt at patriotic fervor, which we see in Canada right now. They're putting soldiers on our coins and on our dollars to give the impression that we respect what they're doing on the world stage and that they're making Canada better and stronger, and that's not the case. It's just, we need some more cannon fodder for the American Empire. And that's, Canada is a part of the American Empire, as simple as that. I believe that we take our orders, not so much from the White House, but the Pentagon. I think that the Pentagon is the senior level of government over the White House. And I think that that's certainly debatable.
Or you could say that senior to both of them is Wall Street, and not only Wall Street, but that cabal of families who owns Wall Street and owns the major corporations and owns everything, and probably got out of this economic mess a couple of years ago because they knew it was coming, and are now standing aside with massive amounts of wealth in their pockets and gold, I guess, and just watching their wealth go up while the world is being brought to the edge of anarchy, which is not going to be pleasant. There have been riots in Eastern Europe already. I don't know if you've heard about that. We heard a little bit here about what happened in Greece because it was so big it couldn't be kept hidden, but they pretended in the media that it was just because of the killing of a teenager by the police, but it wasn't. What happened in Greece was triggered by that, but what it was really all about is the economic mess that is happening. The government of Iceland has fallen. There was a one-day strike in France. And the U.S. individual states, many of them are nearing bankruptcy. And they don't seem to be part of this bailout. They're not getting any money. The money's all going, I don't know where. I don't know if anybody knows where. But it's in the trillions of dollars now that the Americans have given out. And this is money that the U.S. government is borrowing, that the people of the United States are going to have to pay back. They're going to be so far in debt when they wake up. And the people are awake. They don't want these bailouts.
Many are.
Nobody listens.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that frustrating? And, this new Messiah president, Obama. So many people, and I know progressive thinkers that are saying, give him a chance, Ray. Don't be so tough on him. Yeah. And what we're learning is to look at who he's chosen in his cabinet. And these people, many of them are members, again, of these elite secret societies, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations. Those are things you want to look up. Those are things that you're not going to hear much on.
I'll have to admit, I'm still hoping, in terms of Obama, but I'm very nervous, and we'll see what he does.
Well, apparently his economic stimulus plan is moving right along. Yes. I believe the recent one is $835 billion. That's a lot. That's hard to fathom.
So how about here in Canada? What kind of government do we have here? Are we a democracy? And if so, what would you give us on a scale of 1 to 10 in the democratic form?
I'll ask this question. When was the last time that a major issue was brought to the people to vote on, whether in a plebiscite, a referendum of some
The
kind?
last time I remember was 4 years ago, on the date of the last provincial election. We voted on the referendum of whether or not to change our voting system to something called a proportional system called single transferable vote. And it passed by a vote of 57% to 43%, but somehow that wasn't good enough and we didn't get it.
I think that they changed, the number was originally 50%. 50 plus 1. Where they were
50
gonna
plus
okay
1
it.
always wins a referendum.
Well, they decided that, I don't know if they moved it up to 60.
They moved it up to 60. Mr. Campbell, the great Democrat, our leader.
Isn't that something?
In the same election, he got 46% of the vote, I believe, his party, maybe a little bit less.
That sounds about right.
57% of the people of British Columbia voted, of the voters at least, voted to change our voting system to something more democratic, that I believe is more democratic. And the government refused. The opposition didn't want any part of it because they don't want it either, the NDP. And the media was silent because they represent the corporations who also don't want it, because who wants democracy? The people who run the country, they've got it all right now. They have total control. So why would they want to share it with the rest of us?
They don't want these views getting out there. You know, if someone was elected from, you know, the Green Party or the BC Refederation Party, which is a brand new party, well, they're not brand new, but they're doing their best to make waves in provincial politics.
Never heard of them?
Well, yeah. Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Actually, another thing that's along similar lines, you were talking about the percentage of persons that voted for our current leader in BC. We can also look at the last federal election.
Yes.
And most Canadians know that there was an attempt to create a coalition.
Right.
To say that 63% of the voters are opposed to what the Conservative government is doing. That seems to have fizzled away. Ignatieff, the new Liberal.
Yeah, they got rid of Dion. The media ridiculed. I mean, the media I listened to, you know, on radio especially, just ridiculed the idea of a coalition, even though that is perhaps the most fundamental part of our democracy, that the Parliament is the ruler, not the government, not the Prime Minister, the Parliament. And we'd be much better off if Parliament did rule. But, you know, somehow it all fizzled out and Dion was taken out.
Anytime that the media...
At least in Canada, they just take them out politically, not like in the United States.
Yeah, they're not assassinated as often. When the media attacks a certain political leader or an idea, maybe they want to label them conspiracy theorist, and it seems that there's a big gang up, as they did on Dion. And other persons in the States, we can maybe look at Ron Paul, for example.
Dennis Kucinich. And most people will say, who is Dennis Kucinich? And that's exactly the point. Dennis Kucinich brings a lot to the table. He was running against Mr. Obama and against Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination. And his name was basically never mentioned because the kind of thing that he was saying, the power structure did not want mentioned, so they just keep it secret. They just don't report it.
So my point is that when you're teaching yourself history, which is how you have to do it today, you have to teach yourself. Don't believe me, don't believe Jack. You got to do a lot of research, and you got to take bits and pieces from here and there, and that's one thing I push on my show. I'm no smarter than you. I'm giving you some ideas that I think might lead you in a direction, and I'm learning as I go each week on the show. Come with me and let's learn history together, I sometimes say, and that's true. You know, and I'm trying to remain humble as well, and I hope that I do so. I don't want to be a know-it-all, because I'm not, and I don't ever want to pretend to be one. So my point was, when the media jumps on someone, take a look there. Anytime they use that word conspiracy theory, take a look deeper into that, because you're getting close, you're getting warmer. When they start saying conspiracy theory, dig there, it's getting warm. So that's part of learning to be, how to read the media, you know.
So let's move on to something that is also, I think, of tremendous importance, and that also many Canadians have only the slightest glimmering about, because again, it doesn't get much of a mention. And that's an agreement that has two names. The official name is the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America, the S.P.P for short, Security and Prosperity Partnership. Some people also call it the North American Union. basically a merging of Canada, the United States, and Mexico within one border, one set of regulations, no trade barriers between the three countries, full freedom of movement for labor as much as the elite wants the labor to move, and of course the ability of money to flow freely. The lowest possible set of standards, I think, is what they're looking for, etc. Now, we hear nothing about it from the media, and I don't even know if it's still moving ahead or not. It is an agreement that was signed in, I believe, 2005.
With Paul Martin's
by Paul
Liberals.
Martin
Correct.
as Prime Minister of Canada, George Bush as the President of the United States, and Vicente Fox as the President of Mexico.
And it's moved on. There's, well, in all three countries, there's new governments. And as far as I know, everything is full steam ahead.
The last meeting, they meet annually. The public is kept completely outside. There is a group of, I believe, 30 corporate advisors, 10 from each country, who meet with the leaders, and that's leaders with a capital L in the official documentation. They've been given a capital L. The last meeting was in Montebello, Quebec. Nobody really knows what happened at that meeting. It was, when was it?
It was about jelly beans. Don't you know that, Jack?
That's right. That's what Mr. Harper said. It was about jelly beans.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. Go back to sleep.
So one thing that did happen was that somebody from Nanaimo, which is where you're from, filmed a very interesting scene, and maybe you just want to tell us about that.
Sure. The videographer's name is Paul Manley. Manley Media is his production company. He's been a guest on my show a couple times, and he's with the Council of Canadians as well, which I believe is Canada's largest citizen-based activist group. Maud Barlow is still their leader. Her specialty is water issues right now. I'm sure you know about her through your environmental readings. So Paul Manley went to Montebello to film. The Council of Canadians had the agreement with the government that they would accept a huge amount of signatures as a protest, and the government said, yes, we will accept these at the gate. Well, they changed their mind on that, and as they do when there's national or international summits, they create perimeters, little safe
Security
areas.
perimeters.
And what almost always happens is the police change the rules. Well, we're now moving it back to 2 blocks. And that quite often will heat things up a little bit with the protesters saying, we know we can legally be here, but if you have someone dressed in all black and lots of equipment to hurt you with, that's going to get scary. I haven't been in that situation myself, and I don't want to be there on the front line of an international protest like that. So what happened in this instance is disgusting. Leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and Canada should be ashamed that they would do this tactic. 3 that we know of, could have been many more. 3 Quebec police officers.
And we don't even know they were Quebec police. They could have been military, and they could have been American, or
well, the
whatever.
Quebec police did admit.
Yes,
that,
but everything else they said was a pack of lies, so why should we believe that one?
Good point.
But we do know they were military, police, or something like that.
Yeah, law enforcement of one form or another.
Law enforcement in quotation marks. Yeah.
Well, they were dressed as, I guess, anarchist protesters, hiding themselves with rocks in their hands.
At least one rock.
Yes. There were also rocks thrown that Paul witnessed coming from behind, going over the police line. Perhaps they were indeed throwing rocks as well.
So these 3 guys basically went up to a group of protesters, and there was a union leader there who said, we don't want you here because this is a peaceful protest.
Right, yeah. This is peaceful. You go somewhere else. I don't care where you go. Just leave us alone. Don't get us into trouble.
And after a few more seconds, he realized that these guys were police, he thought.
Yes. Yeah.
And he started to call them out as police. That's right. And instead of leaving, what they did was they walked over to the police lines. The line opened, and they went through and were then arrested. Because it had all been caught on film by Paul Manley, if it hadn't been caught on film, the whole thing would have disappeared.
That's right.
It's disappeared anyways.
The CBC covered it. Good for them.
Yes.
Good for them. They didn't do. They never do their job as fully as I wish they would, on matters as important as this.
Anyways, after the Quebec Provincial Police denied everything for as long as they could, it became obvious that these three people were either police or military, and they admitted that they were police. Nobody's head rolled for the lies that the provincial police told us. There's never been an investigation. The issue has been completely lost by the media, and yet what it was on film, a group of, let's say they were Quebec Provincial Police.
Acting as agent provocateurs.
Acting as agent provocateurs to create the incident needed by the police, who were right there wearing the riot gear to attack the protesters. And
the peaceful protesters.
The peaceful protesters. And then the media would have shown that on television.
You bet.
And away we go. The same as we see every time there is that kind of protest. The media almost never goes into the real issues about why people are there in the hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. They don't discuss that. What they show is people, in some cases we now know provocateurs, throwing rocks at buildings and breaking windows. And we should be asking why the media never asks these real questions about what's really going on.
Yeah, yeah.
So the S.P.P. moves ahead, or doesn't. I don't know what's happening.
Well, hard to say. For example, one of the 10 corporations that are on the Canadian side is CanWest Media. They own the two Vancouver papers, the Victoria paper, the Nanaimo paper, dozens of papers. You know, in BC, except for the Globe and Mail, they own all the other newspapers in this region.
Dailies, yeah.
You cannot have a democracy when you have primarily one voice. That's not possible. That right there should be a flag that goes off. The other flag would be when Minister of National Safety, or I'm not too sure his term, Stockwell Day, that creep, got up shortly after and said, well, we don't really see that the Quebec police did anything against the law. You know, they didn't catch him throwing rocks.
Say that?
Stockwell Day said this, and he said, if you want to take up a complaint, take it to the Quebec police. We don't see any damage done.
Now, I heard Paul Manley say exactly what you just said, and the point is that the politicians, or the corporate politicians, are allowed to do that. The media doesn't question. There's no, I mean, Stockwell Day's career could have been ended over that.
And it should have.
And it should have, because clearly this is an incident beyond seriousness, and yet he, as the federal minister in charge, does nothing, and the whole thing is swept under the rug. This was a vicious attack on our democracy. Nothing.
Well, let's carry on
where we are.
Where this is at right now is Paul Manley continued to work on this area with the Security and Prosperity Partnership and TILMA, which is something rather similar. It's an agreement so far between BC and Alberta, with hopes of the other provinces joining in. And
it's a very important part of the S.P.P. probably.
Yeah, it's almost like the S.P.P. on the provincial level as opposed to the national level. So he's just released the world premiere of the film that he spent the last year putting together, and he's calling it You, Me, and the S.P.P. Trading Democracy for Corporate Rule. That's the full title.
You, Me, and the S.P.P. Trading Democracy for Corporate Rule. That's what it's all about.
So he got a number of well-informed Canadians of various degrees to speak on behalf of this this corporatist, this fascist takeover of our democracy.
And once again, just to remind people of what you said, Mussolini's definition of fascism is a merging of state and corporate power. And I think that's where we're moving and have been moving for a long time. It's getting closer. And what's happening economically now may be the next step in that, as governments are perhaps bankrupted along with,
even if the government were to be bankrupted, that wouldn't hurt the power elite.
No, they don't
at all. For example, there's evidence to back this up that there have been numerous economic stock market collapses in which the value of the stocks dwindled to near nothing. The person's, the regular blue-collar workers that had invested, they lose their shirts. However, what happens, these elitists come in and they buy up all those corporations at pennies on the dollar. And 50 years later, those corporations are now back running the world again. You know, and on and on. And there's a lot of people that suggest that this global economic collapse has been structured. It didn't happen by accident. Is it a conspiracy? Did these people knowingly work together to do that? That's what a conspiracy is.
Yeah, just a couple of people working together to do something
To do something wrong, questionable,
wrong,
certainly.
yeah.
That is a conspiracy.
Well, do you think the oil companies conspire against us and the banks?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why would you not think they do that?
So there we are, the S.P.P. Not too many people know about it. Not too many people know about this tilma.
But you can find out about it.
You can.
Just Google Security and Prosperity Partnership. Or what else? How else can people?
You can visit my website.
Okay. What's the website?
What I do, I have a 2-hour weekly show. I edit the show, take out the ums and the ahs, the commercials, and so on, put it back together online, and I publish it weekly. The website is www.unbossed.livejournal.com.
So www.unbossed.livejournal.com.
Yes.
You can also just Google Council of Canadians. I think they've got a lot about the Security and
They
Prosperity
have
Partnership.
plenty, that's right,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And it's basically an agreement, a secret agreement. Secret in the sense that it's never mentioned and most Canadians don't know anything about it. It seems to be moving ahead, although who knows? I mean, it's impossible to get information. Is there another summit planned for?
That's not something that I'm following very closely, but I'm sure that there will be one yearly. Now, let's go back to the beginning of how the S.P.P. came about. We need to go back to 9/11, at which time America said, we're not safe. We need to protect our boundaries. We need to make a North American boundary. We can't have people coming in through Canada, like the Americans said that happened to over 9/11, and that was a lie as well.
That was a lie as well, but
we can't have them coming in from Mexico, even though they do by the hundreds every day.
Thousands,
so
right?
that's a big, silly excuse. But that's how the Security and Prosperity Partnership, or that's the logic that they're going to try to sell it with.
In other words, they want to put a border around all three countries, a tight security perimeter,
and harmonize.
And then within that perimeter, everything can sort of move freely.
So they say.
So they say.
So they say. You know, what's really going to happen in 5-10 years from now, I'm not too sure. I don't have any kids, and I'm kind of glad about that. I want to be an optimist. And, you know, I'm dealing with a lot of people that share my feelings.
Yeah. And we should end on that note. Because there are a lot of great people, a lot of honest people, a lot of people trying to do good things, fighting for what's right and just and fair. And, you know, we have some small victories. We're up against the very powerful opponents, but we continue on.
I don't want to give up. You know, I don't think I could live with myself if I let this evil, these crimes against the human race
and the
continue.
Planet. And the planet.
Yes. You know, so I'm one of many. Jack is one. Steve is one. There's a lot of people that I really respect that I've met due to my political activism. And I want to continue, you know. And if you get a chance to tune into my show, that would be wonderful. And like I said, learn history with me. If there's a story you want to hear, give me an email. We'll have it posted here on the show for you. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to step in and to continue my role as attempting to become the media.
Raymond, I see you brought some books along. Maybe you'd like to say a few things about some of those books.
Thank you, I would. I've got a point to make here. Let me tell you, I went to university to study literature, and I love the written word. I love to read. And what I learned is that all these pieces of literature are talking about history that I don't know the backstory to. So my interest shifted to teaching myself history, you know, so I can place these pieces of literature into context. So what I've done is I've brought some books that are primarily political, and a number of these I've read from on my radio show. The books that you see here, I do recommend them all. However, there's two camps. The first camp is by so-called progressive left writers. They're often pundits on TV. However, their critique on contemporary history basically stops at the official story, and that's very troubling. And their research is fantastic, and what they do present, for the most part, is bang on, and I do recommend these books. However, they don't go all the way. So I'm going to give you a couple titles of this first group that are quality, but I don't think they give you the full goods. For example, Canadian Naomi Klein, The Shock Doctrine, looks at American imperialism, what they've done with the Washington Consensus, which basically means Washington will support the corporate profits throughout the world, in particular coups and so on and so forth in the Americas. Noam Chomsky, he's taken a lot of criticism on his stance on 9/11. He seems that, well, conspiracies just don't happen. Well, Noam, they do, and while you do great work, that's George Monbiot, another one, an English author. Good stuff, but again, he doesn't quite take it all the way. Michael Parenti, I've got a lot of respect for this fellow. For example, if you want to learn about academics that their careers get into a little bit of trouble because they're being a little too honest in their interpretations of American foreign policy, for example, Michael Parenti is someone that I suggest you read. Another one, Howard Zinn. This is a very famous book. I believe it's the best-selling history textbook in America, The People's History of the United States. A fantastic read. However, it seems as if the research that they do proves that the world does run by conspiracy, but conspiracies don't happen. Ooh, how is that possible? How can you prove that they exist, but yet you say that they don't? Gwen Dyer, another pundit for the CBC. When you see someone talking on CBC or American news channels, be wary of these authors. They do good work, but not the full goods. Let's move into the second set of authors. Alex Jones, a very popular radio personality. He's kind of Mr. 9/11, huge following. Another one that I strongly recommend is Naomi Wolf. She talks about the American shift into a fascist form of government. I strongly recommend this book. Likewise, let's move into, this is the first 9/11 truth book that I read that was published in 2004. Prior to the official story, the commission hadn't even come out. So this is his first book. This is maybe his 6th or 7th, and it's 9/11, or I'm sorry, the New Pearl Harbor Revisited. So 4 years later, this is more than likely the most complete story of the 9/11 evidence on both sides. He's comparing them both. Likewise, let's move into a Canadian, Barry Zwicker. He's going to be speaking in Edmonton next month at Edmonton Questions 9/11. This Barry Zwicker is responsible for turning me on to 9/11 Truth Ideas. I watched his first video and I thought, wow, there's more problems in the story than I thought. This is an important book. It's put out yearly, censored 2009. It covers the 25 most important censored stories. Do yourself a favor, pick this book up each year. This one here, talking about conspiracies, Daniel Estulin. He's I don't know if he's a Canadian citizen. He's not Canadian born. However, he looks at the secret societies, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, and the Council on Foreign Relations. That's 3 of maybe a half dozen of these elite secret societies that many people suggest that these are the people who choose the president. It's not the voters. You get a choice between frick and frack. These people are the ones who put frick and frack in that place. Moving into literature. George Orwell, 1984. A masterpiece. It is more true now than ever. Do yourself a favor. Read it. If you want to know where we're going, so says a lot of people, read this book. Likewise, one more. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. It's looking at a very frightening future, which includes science and technology. This author was in the know. He wrote about what he knew the elites were up to, what their ideas were, what their long-term plans were. Look into this. I believe 30 years after he wrote this, he came back and said, guys, this is happening way quicker than I thought it would happen. It's happening just a lot quicker. One more, this one, which fell. Jim Marrs, an amazing author, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. This is a retelling of World War II. This is, as a matter of fact, the first World War II history I've read myself. And in this case, he follows the money, which I think if you're going to teach yourself history, that's a real important aspect, angle to follow. And that's what he does. And what we're finding is a lot of the industrial leaders worldwide, states included, financially backed Hitler's regime, and in some cases all the way through. But certainly the bankers, and you know what's interesting, we were talking a little bit about this economic collapse. A lot of these bailouts, guess what? The guys getting some of these bailouts right now were the same jerks that funded Hitler. I mean, it drives you crazy. Anyway, so those are some books that I recommend that you read. And if you want to think that we're not living in a comic book version of reality, this is the official report on 9/11, but guess what? It's comic book style. So those of you who are getting dumbed down enough that you can't read a full book, you'll be able to read this one, right? There we go.
Thank you, Raymond, and thanks for tuning in, folks. My name is Jack Etkin. You've been watching Face to Face. We've been talking with Raymond Geisler of Nanaimo, and I think we covered a lot of issues. You may or may not agree, but some interesting points of view certainly come across. Thanks again for listening. See you next time. Bye-bye.